should students get at least some of their money back for the disruption to their university education? The higher education watchdog, the snappily titled Office of the Independent Adjudicator, has given its first rulings, ordering some universities to pay back hundreds of pounds if, but only if, they hadn't taken the necessary steps to ensure that students could reach what they called their learning outcomes. How does the National Union of Students react to that? Their president, the president of the NUS, Larissa Kennedy, joins us on the line. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. It does seem as though the office is saying you can get some money back, not a fortune by the sounds of it, but only if you can prove that the university didn't do all it could to make sure you could achieve your, quote, learning outcomes.
I think it's quite difficult to reconcile this system that was built for, anomalies in the system where universities may not have followed due process, and to think that we're able to then bureaucratise the rightful student anger that we're seeing, where students are feeling that they were essentially sold a lie about what was going to be safely possible this term. They've come back to university feeling as though it's only that they've been moved because they wanted to, universities and government wanted to exploit them for fees and rent. And now, it just feels like the government is failing to recognise the levels of student anger and student, dissatisfaction with how they've been treated.
I've no doubt there is an enormous amount of anger, but your language is extraordinarily strong. When you say universities and the government want to exploit students, there's another way of looking at it. During a global pandemic, there was a huge effort made to ensure that young people could carry on learning rather than being trapped in their parents' homes.
I mean, of course, I have full solidarity with many of the staff members who were forced into completely new ways of working without the investment needed to make that digital infrastructure truly accessible. But when you've got students who, for months were asking, what's safely possible, should I move? And were continually reassured, yes, there's going to be face-to-face teaching, where government were flying in the face of scientific research coming from SAGE and the advice from SAGE. And then within days, some students were told everything's going to be online. For the vast majority of students, everything is online, or, they've got about 2 hours of contact time, which students themselves have said feels as though universities are just trying to cover their backs.
Now, look, I can hear your frustration, and we heard it just a little minute ago from those who own and run pubs as well. But what are you actually suggesting should happen? That young people should now give up continuing to be at university and go home, or that they should be paid back thousands of pounds? And if so, where on earth would that money come from?
What needs to happen is that the government steps in and, really underwrites this and recognises that where, across within society, other sections of society, folks have received support from government, students have received nothing. Where students would ordinarily part-time jobs to supplement the maintenance loans that barely cover most people's rent. This year, the jobs that students would ordinarily do in things like retail, hospitality, leisure, they just do not exist. And so students have been hit very hard financially, which we're seeing erupt in the rent strikes across the country. And so what needs to happen is a financial support package going to every single student to support them through this time, to recognise that the ways that they would ordinarily supplement and get by just aren't there, and to make sure that no one is having to turn banks, because I have heard from more students than I ever thought I would, who are talking about having to access food banks just to survive and just to access their education.
Larissa Kennedy, President of the NUS, thanks for joining us.
It's 23 minutes past 7.